I have been reborn, or I'm having a midlife crisis. I got a haircut, I got my ear pierced, and I rewatched season 9 of the Trailer Park Boys, like I do before I do all of these videos, just so that I feel like I know what I'm talking about. And I rewrote the scripts that I've had set up for like a year or more now, because I have viewed it with whole new eyes, bro. And I'm going to lay down the philosophy for you guys today. So buckle up. I'm no stranger to the fact that season 9 of the Trailer Park Boys is not a popular season with at least like the older fan base, like the people who have been there since the beginning. People really don't like Sunnyvale Village. They don't like Sunnyvale being a retirement home now, and they really don't like the character of Colonel Dancer, who is unfortunately the antagonist of the season. And so he's got quite a lot of screen time. In fact, from what I can tell by looking across the internet, this season is widely disliked, and I am going to reserve my opinion till the end. I personally think, removed from watching the season, that Sunnyvale Village is a really good idea. It's essentially what Leahy's ideal version of the park would look like, where there's no alcohol as temptation and there's no Ricky. Obviously, he thinks that like Julian's either going to get sober and be an upstanding guy and be the kind of guy that maybe he could be with one day, or like get out of there and not bother him again by being a delinquent. We've seen in previous seasons what the park would be like if the boys were more in control, and so I think it's only fair that the other side of the coin is explored this season with Leahy. Nobody seems to like Colonel Dancer, and I can't really find a particular reason why they don't like him as like a character and like a device for the show. So to me, it just more seems like they don't like him because he is an antagonist to the boys, which is kind of the whole point. So in reality, didn't he kind of do a good job? But maybe I'm missing the point there. I don't necessarily like Dancer as a character, and I find him really annoying. He's not my favorite antagonist of the whole show. I don't find him massively upsetting as some people supposedly do. As per normal, we will start with Julian. Julian's whole thing throughout the entirety of Trailer Park Boys has been reverse psychology. We find out in this season that he didn't even previously know what that was, so that's interesting. He's used his time in jail, as he is wont to do, to read up on some stuff that's going to benefit him in his criminal activities, and this time it's reverse psychology. And so he puts in more of an effort to use it this season. His understanding, he's got, what is that thing called with the dip? Where like the more you learn about something, the more you realize that you have to learn. It's like he got dumber at using reverse psychology because he read up about it. So now that he's actively trying to use it, it's kind of not working as well. So Julian spends this entire season trying to make Jim think that he's okay with the rules in the park, and that he's going to find his own place outside of the park, and that he's leaving for good, and that he's not bothered about living in the park anymore now that it is Sunnyvale Village. Julian spends the whole season not knowing whether this reverse psychology trick is even working on Jim. He might have to end up living in a dank old motel that doesn't have running water. He spends a lot of the season kind of in this state of anxiety and panic and trying to play it off as being cool. And I personally like Julian in this state. He also has some really sweet moments this season, which you know I love from Julian. He can be quite a cold, hard character, and it's nice to see him have some of these warmer moments. So he buys this motel, convince Jim that that's where he's going to live, to convince him that he doesn't care about the park anymore. And Ricky has kind of spent the season having nowhere to live because Jim doesn't want him in the park anymore. And it ends up with Jules telling Rick that he and his family can live in this motel because Trinity's given birth to a baby. It's this whole drama. And it's really nice because even though you know that Julian needs Ricky around to help him fix up the motel and help him benefit from it in some way, it's just nice of him to help out Ricky, because we know that my man always needs a little bit more of a hand in life. It's really sweet because Ricky's been really getting down on himself and not being able to provide his family with a stable environment to raise Trin's new baby. Also smoke some joints together to celebrate the birth of Ricky's grandson, and Ricky's like got 3 different types of weed, and he's like, which one do you want to smoke? And Julian says, you pick. And Ricky lights all 3 of them and kind of shotgun smokes them and makes Julian do it as well. I love moments with Julian and weed because it's low-key that he can't handle it. It's a moment where Julian looks kind of stupid, which is something that he doesn't like. He doesn't like to put himself in situations where he's going to look stupid, right? So we have to take these moments where we can. And then there's the moment as well where he admits to the boys that he's been using reverse psychology this whole time, that he doesn't actually want to live in the motel and leave Bubbles at the park. And Bubbles is relieved because he's thought his friends are going to be leaving him this whole time, and now he knows that that's not actually the plan. And it's, again, a moment of vulnerability from Julian that I really, really appreciate. It's a moment where he admits that he doesn't have all the answers and he doesn't know what he's doing. And the only other time I can think of him doing that is when that Bible basher girl took advantage of him and stole all the weed. And that wasn't that way back in like season 2 or something. I don't even know, but it was ages ago. It's not often that Julian's all about appearing masculine, right? But it's not often that he's man enough to admit that he made a mistake because he thinks that it's not manly to make mistakes in the first place. So for him to own up to the boys and be honest and vulnerable in this moment is cute and sweet. And I like it. Though Julian has these sweet moments with the boys, he's still his usual dickhead self everywhere else in this season. Especially the moment at the end where he convinces Randy to put on the bear costume so that he's the one who goes to jail instead of Julian. Randy agrees to do it for love and Mr. Leahy, but in reality, Julian has just manipulated him to going there, and then he basically leaves Mr. Leahy for dead in a pool of liquor. And when he doesn't die in the pool of liquor and he turns up at the park meeting when Julian takes over, he kicks Mr. Leahy out. Like Mr. Leahy kicked Ricky out at the beginning of the season. He basically uses Randy to buy himself enough time to take over the park and enact his fascist regime, okay, in order to kick Mr. Leahy out. And he doesn't care how much time Randy goes down for, and he doesn't care that Randy's going to come out and technically not have a home because he knows he's going to want to live with Mr. Leahy, right? Even though we see that Julian can in fact be sweet, he is not sweet. And I think it's really funny that some people try and say that Julian's being a dick at the end by kicking out Mr. Leahy as if they've got any sort of camaraderie at all. But in my opinion, and you'll know this if you've seen any of these reviews before, I think Julian's always been a dick, and I think that is an essential part of his character, and I don't think he's going to change anytime soon. Weirdly, after saying that, I actually like Julian's characterization a lot more in this season. I feel like they have embraced his dickishness a lot more, and the narrative isn't afraid to show him as a dick as much anymore. And I don't want to say it and frame it as this thing of like, oh, men and their fragile egos, but I feel that a lot of people like identify with Julian and want to be Julian and want to be that hard masculine man, and they don't like the fact that it's kind of now being outed that Julian's not a good guy and he's not the hero of the park that everybody kind of wanted him to be. That he can do dickish things like this to characters we love like Mr. Leahy is narrative proof and confirmation from almost the writers that Julian maybe isn't the stand-up guy that he's been hailed as this whole time. I feel like some people get a little bit hurt by that, and it's not an ego thing, it's not. I feel like anybody gets upset when a character is attacked that they identify with, but like I'm saying, I really like Julian this season. I feel like his victory at the end where he takes over the park feels earned because he hasn't known what he's doing the whole season, and he hasn't had this like self-assured cocky nature that I don't like about him. And the fact that they allowed him to have these sweet vulnerable moments to remind us that he is this essentially human character, right, that we know and that we love. It's Julian, okay, but Julian to, yes, a more human place this season for me personally. And I don't know, when I just went on a rant about masculinity, I think, and that wasn't in the notes. Here we are again in the garage talking about feminism. So let's talk about Ricky. The man, the myth, the legend. Ricky gets out of jail, immediately goes to pick up Trinity from George's. Trinity is obviously having a baby. Lucy comes out of the house in this great scene where she's just like, we've got to go right now. She doesn't want Ricky and George to talk. She doesn't want Ricky to know what she and George have been up to while he's been gone. She just wants to leave with Ricky, and I think that's, I think it's really funny. I don't know. Then, obviously, because Ricky's not allowed to live at the park, Lucy decides to go back with George because she doesn't want to live in the car. Ricky basically spends the season trying to get his family back and get them somewhere to live, and by extension of that, to have sex with Lucy because my man is frustrated after being in jail for so long, you know? Now that Trinity's older, she gets a little bit more characterization. I think it's really sweet the way she's so accepting of Ricky and his lifestyle. Like, I know she grew up with it, but I don't know, they could have used her character to be like, oh, Dad, like, I want you to buy me all these expensive things and stuff, and like Ricky has to steal them. But she just likes living in the car with him and living in a barn with him. Like, she literally has a baby in a barn this season. Ricky has a lot of cute moments with her, like he says, oh, show me that beautiful smile, and Jacob, her boyfriend, tries to speak for her at one point, and he's like, I think my daughter can speak for her fucking self, basically, which, even though we know it's partly because he hates Jacob, it is a nice sweet thing for somebody to say, right? I think it is. Jacob is building up to asking Trinity to marry him this season. It's funny because Jacob's character started as he was copying Julian, but now they've kind of turned him into a mini Ricky. He talks about growing dope to support his family, and Ricky kind of spends the season teaching him the ways of how to be a man, right? Or what Ricky's view of being a man is. And it's kind of cute as well how Jacob does look up to Ricky and does want to be like him. He genuinely thinks that he's been a good dad to Trin and he wants to be the same for this baby that is coming, right? Ricky has so many iconic moments this season, okay? He gets out of jail and immediately starts rolling a joint on a cop car because now he's like selling weed to the cops anyway, so it's not like any of them are going to bang him up for it. It turns out that he's really good at floristry, which I think is really funny. He gets in some trouble there and he has this iconic line where he's like, I don't come to your job and slap the cocks out of your mouth, do I? Or something like that. And I use that pretty often, I'm not going to lie, when people are mad at me when I'm at work. I think it's so cute at the end when the motel is burning down that he runs into this burning building for his grandson's toy that he made himself. Even though it is a hideous toy that looks like something off Button Moon, I think that in itself is inherently adorable that Ricky would risk it all for this Herbert. We really lean in these later seasons, I feel, into Ricky and his dynamic with his family and him kind of getting this weird reverse wholesome happy ending with his family, and I personally really like that because even in the early seasons all he ever wanted to do was just be with Lucy and have a simple life, and I just really hope that he gets that, bro. I really do. Moving on to Bubbles. This isn't really a big season for Bubbles. He's kind of laying low at the park and just going along with the flow of things until the guys get back because he's never really been the gung-ho take action kind of guy anyway. It's weird because in any other show or in like a real life situation, to get with the times and to move on and deal with the fact that it's not the 90s anymore and they're getting on in life. Like Bubbles would be in the right, okay? But because this is the Trailer Park Boys, we all know that we just want to get things back to normal in the park, bro. Bubbles and the other guys, like T, who go along with the new ways in the park, are kind of seen as almost like weak in this season, which I think is interesting. The same kind of dynamic as we should be rooting for Randy and Leahy because they're getting onto the bad guys that the police are letting fly under the radar. And in any other show, they would be the good guys, right? But it's not this show, and I love that. Obviously, Bubbles does have a huge moment at the end of the season where he stands in front of a tank for his cats. Colonel Dancer obviously comes driving a fucking tank when he's absolutely pissed and tries to knock over everything in the park, and Bubbles isn't having it because his cats are in his shed, and then all the rest of the guys from the park come and stand with Bubbles in front of his shed, and it's this really big community moment, and it's big for me, okay, because the season has felt so not like Trailer Park Boys that to have this moment at the end where all the park comes together and then Randy knocks this guy out is great, and it brings the season and the show back to a familiar place and restores everything just in time for next season, exactly the same as it always does. Why were we worried? One thing I do notice about this season is that even though we've come so far from the first, there are still these callbacks to earlier seasons that really, for me, keep the heart of the show, okay? And that's like Bubbles being a modern day philosopher when he tells Ricky that Orangey, his fish, has died, and Ricky reacts really badly. Bubbles starts going on about how Orangey's not really dead, his energy is just transmuted, okay? And he's out there in the space-time continuum, bro. When they discover that Sam has fully evolved into a caveman, he says the metamorphosis is complete. Just a cute little reference there to some cat. Leahy this season looks like he's gotten everything he wants. The whole series, like he's finally got some semblance of power in the park. In fact, he's like one of the top positions. But even though he should be happy about this, and we see that he does take some satisfaction in getting one over on the boys throughout the season, it all comes at a cost to his true self. He's not drinking anymore, which arguably is a good thing, but also he's not with Randy. And you know that I think he and Randy are in game. He gets halfway through the season and he's like, I don't even know if I was ever really gay. It might have just been the liquor. And I'm like, Leahy, you are the liquor. Bitch, you are the liquor. Get back with Randy right now. Yeah, they're not together this season. It's not sad. It's not actually sad, but I'm not talking about that yet. We're talking about how, okay, so presumably Jim and Bob, who are like, kind of together, kind of dating, but not. So Leahy doesn't even really have a relationship with Bob anymore. He just kind of has this sham of power in the park. They presumably hired Dancer to keep the place safe and whatnot. And even though he supposedly answers to them, Leahy's like scared of him because he's crazy. He has this like respect for him because he's like an army guy. And Leahy's a policeman, so the hierarchy is there, right? And all of this, I was like, it's a bit weird to not see Mr. Leahy stand up for himself. The thing that really made me question it was he big time let Dancer bully Randy this season. I always thought it was really weird that he didn't stand up for him because one thing about Mr. Leahy is that he's always going to defend Randy's honor, right? And I was like, oh, maybe it's because like he's having these feelings of denial and he wants to keep Randy at arm's length. So he's kind of using Dancer as an excuse to do that. The more I thought about it, I was like, this kind of isn't right. And it made me have this big kind of revelation about Leahy on the bike on my way home from work, right? So this is what I kind of discovered. Boys, it's kind of hard to admit it, but Mr. Leahy is a weak character. He's a weak guy. It's really hard to talk about him this way because obviously we think about him as this powerful guy, this ridiculous guy, this out there character, but that's not Leahy, that's the liquor. He's not that strong person without his Dutch courage, basically. He is a person who is like almost afraid of being himself, and the only way that he gets to truly express, I guess, is by getting pissed. He's letting Barb somewhat string him along this season. Obviously, she has her reasons for being reticent to jump back into a relationship with him because it's never fucking worked in the past. But speaking from Leahy's perspective, he's getting basically binned off and pushed to the side by Barb. He's sober, so I can't imagine he's having a lot of fun. And even though he does supposedly have the power in the park, he's bending his knee to Colonel Dancer, who's this guy who's supposed to be beneath him, right? So even when Leahy has this illusion of everything that he wants, he doesn't actually have everything that he wants because he doesn't have the balls, basically, the cojones. He's not Roman enough to take it, right? To be himself and to be in his power, right? He thinks it's one or the other. Leahy has this very rigid idea of how he's supposed to be as a man. This is where he's very comparable to Julian again, right? They both got this kind of toxic masculinity thing going on, I guess. Where they both have this idea of what a man should be, and it shapes the way that they make decisions and the way that they operate in the world. Julian has gone a completely different path than Leahy, and Leahy has clearly gone for the authoritarian route in being a policeman and stuff, right? But another thing that plays into this is obviously you have to remember Leahy didn't even want to come out as gay in the first place, so he clearly like experiences some kind of shame around that fact, and that kind of ties into the theme as well, right? Because like, I guess it's not masculine to be gay, especially back in the 90s when all this was being made, right? We have to remember. I don't think your sexuality really has anything to do with how masculine you are. I'm speaking specifically from Leahy's perspective here, and from a perspective of like that old school masculinity that his character represents. But it's the strict adherence to this idea of masculinity that makes him a weak character, right? Because he's doing everything he can to hold on to his power at the park and not being true to himself. And we know, like, the truest self that he can be is obviously, in the context of the series, the liquor. And that's how we all love him. That's him being truly himself and truly in his a divine masculine energy, right? I don't even know if what I am saying makes sense, but it was just a big revelation to me that Leahy is actually a weak character. And I know that he's weak in other senses. Like, I've always seen him as weak in his relationship with Randy, the way that he can like put Randy down in order to make himself feel better, and the way that he like holds this authority over Randy because he like rescued Randy off the streets and whatnot. But I've never really thought about it in a wider context, and I think him like groveling under Colonel Dancer this season and like letting him treat Randy like shit, even though we all know that he's in love with him, really just made me realize that. And I thought I'd share that with you. It's probably as well why Leahy's got such big beef with Ricky, because as somebody who feels shame about the person that they truly are, it's probably hard to see Ricky being so unabashedly himself all the time and like receiving no consequences for it the way that Leahy probably feels like he's received consequences. Anyway, I think that Leahy secretly, like we all do, wants Julian to cause shit at the park and to take back over and to get Colonel Dancer the fuck out of there, because Leahy, even if he doesn't realize it consciously, is not happy. And that's him this season. He's in the shit abyss, bro. He's in there. I do really lean into this aspect of Leahy's character as the seasons go on from now, and I feel like there are like a lot more instances where he lets people be mean to Randy for way too long in a way that I didn't really get earlier seasons Leahy doing, and that's one of the things that I can say about the later seasons that I don't really necessarily vibe with. I feel like he and Randy do get flanderized quite a bit toward the end and kind of pushed to the side as characters, but we will get there. Randy, meanwhile, cannot escape his eternal hunt for just some fucking respect in a relationship or like anything really. He's obviously being treated like shit by a Dancer, as we already know, and like he's trying to make him wear his shirt and just being generally mean to him, calling him fat and whatnot. And then he's also in this relationship with Donna, continuing from last season, that is just really not good, and she's really mean to him. He's fighting to keep up these things, I guess, for appearance's sake, and to like prove, you know what Randy's whole deal is. He wants to prove that he's more than this guy who came from the streets, right? And so to have like a girlfriend, a successful relationship, and a job is better than having neither of those things, right? He needs to have something to show for himself. So eventually it all gets too much for him and he quits the job and he breaks up with Donna. And he just, it's him kind of having the same issue as Leahy, right? He's got this idea of what he has to be in order to prove himself. But the thing that makes him truly free and truly happy is like casting off all the bullshit that he thinks he needs, like the job, like Donna, and having a fucking drink with Bubbles. I love that they continued the symbolism of Randy's walkie-talkie from the earlier seasons. When he quits his job, Colonel Dancer takes his walkie-talkie away from him, even though it isn't the park's property, it's Randy's personal walkie. His quote, not mine. The walkie in previous seasons was like this symbol of Leahy's respect for Randy and Randy's like place in the park. And so Colonel Dancer taking it away from him is like basically a symbol of the Colonel taking away everything from Randy, a symbol of like the respect that Dancer is taking away from him, but also because of its connection to like Mr. Leahy. Basically, in Randy's mind, the Colonel has taken Mr. Leahy away from him as well, because the Colonel is the one keeping Mr. Leahy dry. Randy knows that the second drop of liquor touches Mr. Leahy's lips, they will be back on again. I love the scene where Barb and Leahy give Randy a lift back to the park, and Mr. Leahy is trying to get Barb to go on a date, and she's like, I don't know if we should, I don't know, it's a good idea. And Randy's like, what the fuck, Barb, are you gonna make him beg? I absolutely love that. I love that he like critiques her for not treating him the way that Randy would treat him. Which brings me to just like the big storyline that is Barb, Jim, and Randy this season. Because even though Barb and Jim are kind of together at the beginning, and Randy's of course seeing Donna, the whole season feels like a big Randy and Jim love story, and I really love that. You can tell that Randy's pining for him from the beginning, and you kind of don't really know how Mr. Leahy feels. I do, he's in denial, but like, you know, it's ambiguous. And Jim says all this about thinking he was never really gay, and I feel like that is like, all right, bet. Randy teams up with the boys to like take down Dancer and get the park back. And part of that is seducing Mr. Leahy, not just seducing him like sexually, but seducing him with a bit of rock vodka, motherfucker. So even though Barb has kind of been considering getting back with Jim all season, she obviously knows the way that that usually goes. She's had a terrible lot with men, and I feel like she's just at the end of her fucking tether. So Barb has actually been having a lot more fun just hanging out with Sarah and Donna, the girls, right? And at the end of the season, she lets Jim down on their big reuniting date to get drunk with girls because they won on the slot machines or whatever. And this creates, oh God, I've got chills right now, what I think is the best Randy and Jim moment from the whole series, in my opinion. And it's when Jim is sitting there and he made this whole big dinner for Bob. It's hard not to feel sorry for him because he really did try here. He made this whole dinner for her and he was all set up, ready to go, very romantic. And she calls him up and she's pissed with the girls and she basically says she's not coming home, she's going to stay in a hotel. And he sits there, he's eating this dinner for two on his own, and it's all very sad. And Randy turns up and Jim tells him that Bob is out getting sloshed. And Randy turns to him, this big shit-eating grin on his face, and he says, well, that sounds like fun.
What happened to the love of your life, Barb? She's out with Donna and Sarah. They're getting drunk. That sounds like fun.
And you just know it's the end of the episode, but you just know it's on between them. And I don't know if anybody even cares about this love story as much as I do, but I thrive off it. I love them together. And I love like the mischievousness of this moment. And something inherently really romantic about two people who don't have to say something and they just understand each other on that level. I mentioned it ages ago when Jim was on the phone ordering fucking cheeseburgers and he just looks over at Randy and Randy holds up four and he's like, well, we're gonna want 4 cheeseburgers. Like, you know, like they just click. They are just soulmates. And I just love it. And I love this moment. And it also leads to one of the best opens of all time, in my opinion. Barb comes home and just discovers Randy and Jim on the floor in a drunken, naked mess. I do really have sympathy for Barb in this moment because you know that I think that she's just had such a shit time and this is the breaking point for her officially. But at the same time, it's just so warranted. I'm just so happy that Jim and Randy are back together that the sympathy for Barb is second to that, and I can only apologise to her. She does get to go and stand up to Dancer after this. She has her own little empowering moment where she goes out to him and she's basically like, fuck off, you massive prick. And then she like runs off with the girls into the sunset, and we don't see her again until the end of the season when she gets arrested. And so she's one of the ones who goes to jail at the end of this season. Very surprising. Yeah, Sarah and Donna have been like encouraging Barbara's dark feminism the entire season and just trying to make her let go. You know what? This is like such a woke season actually, because it's the same thing with Barb. She's got this rigid idea of what she has to be like. And maybe this is like related to the fact that she was this spoiled little rich girl whose dad owns a trailer park. And she's slowly kind of been broken down over the seasons to where she's in the same position as the other people in the park. And she's kind of lost everything along the way as well. I think she's just never really considered first of all, lesbianism. And, you know, like, also a little bit of light crime. And I feel like she has a lot of fun with it, and I can't fucking blame her. And it sets her up for next season, which I know a lot of people don't like what gets done with Barb next season, but we're not talking about that yet. So my season notes. Corey and Jacob also have a love story this season to parallel Jim and Randy, which I think is really funny. Basically, obviously, Jacob is with Trin the whole time and trying to like provide for his family, and so he doesn't have as much time to hang out with Corey anymore. And he and Corey were attached at the hip, and Corey used to be attached to Trevor at the hip, so I don't think Corey really knows how to function on his own, right? I mean, he only has half a brain. It's weirdly wholesome and cute, and it's also very funny. And then at the end of the season, they both end up going to jail together, so it's like, oh, they finally get to be together in the end, like as if it was really a romance between them. And I think that is also really cute and really funny. I love a bromance, guys. I do love a bromance. I go on all the time about how I love stories about girls and I love women and fuck men, but on the sly, there's nothing like a bromance. And this is why I love this series so much, because the toxic friendship between Ricky and Juliet is just like, mwah, and you know that. They've got that plutonium kind of love, my guy. I don't have any favourite episodes this season because it's not because it wasn't good. I actually really, really enjoy this season. I don't know if that's going to like hurt anybody's feelings or whatever, but it's my opinion. I genuinely feel like this season is just really cohesive. It works as one long story, and that's why it's hard for me to pick out a particular episode. There's not one that really rises above the level of the rest. I know that people don't like the later series, and there is a particular hatred for this one because they don't like Sunnyvale Village and they don't like how changed the park is, and they want everything to be like the old Trailer Park Boys. But I think the thing about that is that the narrative agrees with these people. It's not like the show is out here trying to do something new and exciting to change things up. They have changed things specifically so that they can be reverted back by the end, so that we're all rooting for the boys to get the park back, right? That's the whole point of the season. We're not supposed to like Colonel Dancer. He's the villain. He's the outside threat that we have seen in other seasons, but he's already in by the time the boys get out of jail. And so this time it's not about protecting the park. It's about it's just opened up the series into like a new like dimension, I guess. But they haven't taken anything away from us. Like, it's only one season, right? they just tried something new, and everything was fine by the end. So I don't really see what the issue is. I think it's good when we try to explore and do something a little bit different. The series has been going on for some time at this point and will go on for much longer, so it's not completely out of the realm of possibility that we're going to be trying some more experimental stuff down the line, okay? And I, for one, I'm ready for it, and I'm ready to give them the grace, guys. But what about you? I'm going. I have talked myself into a stupor, and I must leave. I hope that anybody who is still watching this has somewhat enjoyed it, and maybe I will catch you next time.